your beautiful pictures of horrible things.
Horrible thing.
But you have such a wonderful positive perspective on all the horrible rubbish and litter that you collect. Tell us a little bit about where you are and how you got started on this adventure.
I live on the south coast of England, so I live on the Solent, which is the seaway that goes to one of our major ports, Southampton. And I've been walking my dog along that Solent shore for about 16, 17 years. And when I first came here, when I got married, the whole shore was multicolored with plastic and bottle tops and broken glass. It was like a rubbish dump. And I began collecting it. And to begin with, there was so much, it was really disheartening. But now I'm just getting a bucket full every week. So things are changing. And it's been really fascinating to see actually what could be found on the Solent.
Yeah. It's amazing. I hear you and I empathize with that feeling. I do monthly cleanups and it's so
Mm,
easy to feel overwhelmed and
mm.
just what am I doing? Why do I bother? Nobody else is doing it. Like how do you keep going? How do you keep finding the motivation to pick up other people's waste?
Well, the truth is, lots of other people are doing it. And we're in the New Forest National Park here. So the shoreline is the national park. It's also the Crown Estates. It belongs to the Queen from the high tide to the low tide mark. It's a unique environment. I'm the only one going out there, which is probably good because it's a delicate and very sensitive habitat. There's bird life, nesting birds. There's one other person who I sort of overlap with at a certain stretch where there's a beach with public access. But in our national park, there are 1,300 volunteers they're called Litter Pickers of the New Forest. And I'm an ambassador for Keep Britain Tidy, and we've got hundreds of thousands of volunteers. That they're wonderful. They go through the parks, through the towns, mainly picking up litter. Also tackling the verges, but of course, verges by a lot of roads are too dangerous. It's too dangerous to pick up litter along the highways. The council and the highways have to close those roads before we can go out with our litter pickers. But I live right here on the tidal estuary, and it is important, I think, to make sure that our seas are clean. They're getting not just full of plastic, but really, really serious things, and a lot of it's to do with fishing. So I joined the Marine Conservation Society, and they ask their litter pickers to classify what they find. So, for instance, now bear in mind that these things have been cleaned, they've been in the salt water, so I'm not too revolted by them. But we find an awful lot of these. They're disgusting. These are plastic tampon applicators. Mm?
Oh,
Totally
that is
unnecessary
gross. Oh my
to be made
goodness.
out of plastic. I mean, if they haven't stopped manufacturing them, they really must do because people flush them down the loo. So these are indicators that sewage is going into the Solent, and it's just not one or two things; it's lots. This is another indicator. These are all plastic cotton bud stalks, and I find thousands of them, and they're really fiddly to pick up, and they break. Um, but these are indicators of sewage as well. People flush them down the loo, and they're stopping manufacturing them out of plastic now. But I mean, there's just so many in the environment, and I've kept them in a jar, really just to hang on, show other people. So I just do this for educational purposes, keep them. But I have made some artwork. But really, what's more important, here we have plastic straw. We're zoning those out in the UK. Normal litter. So one of the classifications is sewage, one is just litter. And I never mind finding things that people have dropped by mistake. Like you find quite a lot of babies' dummies. Here's one. Don't know what that is. Then the other classification is fishing items, detritus from fishing, and I find a lot. So about 30% of everything I pick up is fishing related. This is a kind of toggle or float. It might have come off a yacht actually. Stuff that comes off boats, but I mean, I've got lots of these jars. This is just a random find. Here we've got fishing line, and of course it's there to kill. And with ordinary plastic like this, which the wildlife can also get harmed by. Look, there's a little picnic knife. What else have I got in here?
How long have you been doing it, Sophie?
Well, there you go. You can see that's angler's line, but a lot of it's commercial fishing. So I've been doing it, well, all my life, but I started here about 16 years ago because it was just there. And then nearly 3 years ago, I made a concerted effort to go out every day I could. And the reality was that last year I only went out for 150 days because it was stormy or because I broke my arm actually, or I had work commitments or was not at home. But 150 days a year is quite a lot. It's about
my gosh, that is so impressive. I've been doing for the last few years once a month, and I feel like that's a lot. But then I saw a guy in Africa who's also doing it every single day, and he's making it into a kind of business. Derek here is asking Beole River. So the name of the river is the Solent, and it's the strait between Europe and the UK. Is that right?
No,
I'm showing it. No,
it's not a river. It looks a bit like a big river. It's not. It's tidal. It's sea. It's part of the English Channel, and it's between the mainland of the UK and an island off the coast called the Isle of Wight.
Okay.
And it's all in one county, actually, the county of Hampshire. And I actually live on the Lymington River, which is a small river going into the Solent. So I live on the tidal estuary. And the thing about the Solent is there's not much wave action. So any broken glass, it doesn't get worn down. It stays as broken glass. So it can harm wildlife, people's dogs, people's children, and there's a lot of it, a lot. I haven't been able to take my dog along some of the sections.
Yeah, the glass is something we don't. I'm cleaning on an inland sea, so it's in the middle of Japan. It's not open to like waste from other countries. It's just Japanese waste. We don't find a lot of glass. But it looks like you find glass quite often, and it's often broken glass. You had some interesting stories about a dry jar being used by a mouse, so you let that be. If it's not dangerous, right?
Well, that was actually a old milk bottle. They've got quite wide tops that we used to have on deposit return, as it were. You know, we used to get daily milk deliveries in these bottles, and then they were washed up and reused. And I find quite
that is a shocking thing because I always say reusable is so much better. But of course, if it's reusable and it's well-made glass, it's also going to be in the waterways for a very long time, and it could break, right?
Yeah, I find quite a lot just from local dairies. I find quite a lot of the old deposit return Corona bottles as well. Because, they are tougher, so they do last. And they do trap animals. We find quite a lot of dead rodents in bottles. But what I find extraordinary is the amount of glass bottles that are thrown from moving vehicles. And I also do the lane going along the river here. And there's a lot of, it's alcohol abuse. There's a lot of cans of drink, and there's a lot of bottles, heavy bottles of alcohol that are thrown from moving vehicles, and often high moving vehicles. You can tell from the angle, or if they've got over a hedge into a wood. So they're being thrown out of lorries and vans, presumably while people are working or at the end of the working day. but it's evidence that people are drinking and driving, and they don't care about their waste, so they're throwing it into the nature reserve or bluebell woods. Monitoring it, it should be, I think, there should be very heavy fines. I think what should happen is that you should have points taken off your license, like 9 points. If I have my dog loose in my car without a safety belt on him, I could get 9 points off my license. If I'm transporting a canoe on my roof rack and it fell off by mistake, even though I put it on properly, I get 3 points off my license. But if I fly tip oil, I've just found 2 full gallon cans of used oil in the nature reserve. If I fly tip, there are penalties if you're caught, but I don't think I get any points taken off my license.
Wow.
So I could say, oh, that canoe, I was just fly tipping it. I had to get rid of that canoe. So all these things that I find, oh goodness.
Is that a toy?
I don't know what it is. I presume it's a toy. I find quite a lot of toys. But really the fishing is the big problem. Now we find a lot of this. Do you know what that is? To my horror, I find out they're calling it a sea kiss. Sea kisses, these are. They're not kisses. These are little pieces of PVC fishing net. And apparently what happens is that the trawlers use this PVC netting that's quite small, the size, and when it gets torn, they don't mend it. They have machines on board on the vessels that chop it up into small pieces, and then they chuck the small pieces into the sea. And these are washing up all the time, every day. Every day I find a few. Because it's cheaper for them to discard the pieces at sea rather than bring back the nets or the pieces and discard them responsibly. And this has really, really got to stop. It's got to be deemed illegal in the world, because otherwise, I mean, they're shooting themselves in the foot. The fish are going to eat these pieces, or the microplastics resultant when they break down. And we're not going to be able to eat our fish. And if I can take the camera outside, I can show you, I found fluorescent light bulbs washed up on the Solent. Now, these are being chucked off ships, possibly chucked off trawlers, because I don't think they're British, actually. So I don't think they're from landfill sites. Now, these fluorescent light bulbs, and they're like a metre long or half a metre long, apparently if they break, they pollute 30,000 litres of water. They've got mercury in them. Our fish are just going to imbibe mercury, and if you give your child a fish, that child is going to be poisoned. So people are already saying, don't eat fish because you're eating elements and chemicals that you don't want in your body.
And plastic. Rob has joined from Maidstone. Thanks for joining, Rob. Yeah, we have a few people from the UK joining. You are able to document and share your stories. And some of the plastic you find is actually very interesting and over 50 years old, like some of the antique plastics. You can see the brand, and the brand is no longer made anymore. I found that really interesting.
Lots. I think especially on the Solent, because there's no wave action. So these fluorescent light bulbs and ordinary light bulbs wash up. Okay? And things aren't broken down so much as if you're on the Atlantic, when you only get the sort of heavy plastics. You'll get things like bottles of bleach and Domestos. We'll get 25-litre things of bleach that have been used as buoys by the fishermen. Mooring buoys for lobster pots and things like that. But I mean, these plastics, they're not going to, let me show you this, they're not going to break down easily. And then what we've also got is a lot of nesting birds out on the mud flats, and this happens. Now, this is a bit of like a takeaway food container, but it looks just like a cuttlefish. We have a lot of cuttlefish, and the birds eat the cuttlefish shells, the backbone part of it, because it's rich in calcium. And you can see here that the birds have been pecking at this polystyrene, thinking it is a cuttlefish shell. And I find this a lot. Really sad, actually. I don't come across injured birds. I come across dead birds. I haven't been looking in their stomachs, but I'm sure that they're getting some of this into their system. I certainly find we have wild ponies on the Solent and grazing there, and I certainly find a lot of plastic that's been through their systems, and quite big things like it says actually here, please recycle me. Well, a pony has eaten this and it's come through their body. Okay? It's a wild pony that should be grazing naturally on the New Forest National Park. And we also have cattle free grazing, and the cattle are eaten, they're beef cattle, and donkeys and deer. So our larger mammal species are eating some of this. I've pulled some fishing line out of a wild horse's mouth while it was grazing. What else have we got in here?
You also said you find a lot of clothesline pegs.
Yeah, a lot of clothesline pegs. Don't know why. I don't know if they come off yachts or what. I find a lot of. It's funny. Do you know what? I find a lot of cigarette lighters. Mostly, what I find are things that are bad for people. So tobacco products or related things like cigarette lighters, drug-related litter. A lot of those NOS containers, nitric oxide containers, and Lynx Africa is a deodorant for men or a perfume for men, an aftershave for men. We find a lot of those in the forest. People are sniffing them. They're sniffing the product and then they discard the can. Tins of overcarbonated fizzy drinks. Just this morning, I went out and cleared the causeway going over the Lymington River. So this is where the river's tidal. And I found overcarbonated fizzy drinks thrown from a high vehicle. The delivery drivers, who've been so wonderful during the pandemic and during lockdown, they've kept going by drinking Red Bull and drinks that aren't really good for them, and then the can goes out of the river. I find McDonald's wrappers here all the time. Our nearest McDonald's is about a half an hour drive away. These takeaway food containers travel in the vehicles, and then they get to the river and they think, this is where my takeaway food container, my polystyrene or my plastic should be thrown. People have an attitude that the river or the sea is a dustbin, is a viable dustbin. So they come all over the heath, all through the national park, come down the hill, they see the river, and then that's where they throw their litter from their car. They also lose things like these reflectors.
Wow, yeah.
So what else do I find? Lots of sweetie wrappers, biscuit wrappers, a lot of over-sugared food. Sugar is a drug. It's a recreational drug, if you like. It's more addictive, apparently, than cocaine. And so a lot of sweetie wrappers, chocolate bars and things like that, they then get thrown as litter, as trash. And I find them washed up on the seashore.
One of the things that I wanted to comment on, because it's something we find a lot of as well, is the plastic food wrappers, like bread wrappers, which are plastic, or small shopping bags, is all perfectly beautifully knotted up, and then you find it in the water. So we often find like bento containers, like a lunchbox container and a plastic drink bottle, and it'll all be beautifully tied up in a plastic bag, and then we'll find it in the river. And you're like,
Kate, morning,
what?
I found a wrapper and it was knotted neatly and then thrown in the tidal river. And there's a guy someone who uses my local lane here running by the nature reserve. I know what he has for breakfast every morning. He has tins of cider for breakfast, and the ciders come in a yellow wrapper, and they're all knotted and flung into the nature reserve every single day. That guy's got a problem. He or she is going to work on cider, on alcohol, and at the wheel of a van that's quite high. That's what I can tell. That's the evidence.
Wow.
In the
And
same river.
are you
Sorry, I find a lot
along?
of stolen stuff as well.
Yeah, are you along a shipping lane? Because you sometimes
Hmm.
talk about finding like a whole case of adult diapers. That was a shock.
Oh gosh, that was in the river. I thought I found a dead body actually because it moved.
Oh,
Or
oh my
it's really
gosh.
shocking. Yes, the adult diapers. They were actually new. They weren't soiled. They were discarded in the river. I suppose people are embarrassed or ashamed, so they don't want to put it out with their domestic rubbish. And they took these products down to the river and put them in the river, and they swelled with water, so they were really heavy for me to
Yeah.
shift and lugged to my car. And the plastic had been there for some time, so it kept it was awful. It kept splitting again, blah, 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 blah. And then right
And
back.
the chemical inside just keeps soaking in water. So we actually do find adult diapers in the river in Japan too sometimes.
Yeah.
It is just shocking. How does it end up there?
I don't know, and we often find babies' diapers. And in England, you're meant to put your dog poo in a little plastic bag and knot it and take it home and dispose of it responsibly. But people don't like carrying dog poo in plastic bags, so they leave it. So this morning on the flood defence gates, I found a dog poo in the flood defence gates right by the tidal river in its plastic bag. And it was like left there for someone like me to pick up, um, as if I'm employed to do this. It was the tidal defence barrier was being used as what they call a virtual bin. So people who've studied why people um, uh, throw litter and who throws litter, people love a virtual bin, which could be a planter, um, or they like putting things behind telephone boxes or the equivalent. So if something looks like a bin, if it's got a little concave bit, people will put their rubbish in it. It's really
Yeah.
peculiar, actually. And we
Rob
have a
has a
problem with dog
good
food.
Yeah, Rob has a good point here. Governments must take action by changing the law on plastic use. If they don't, there's not enough incentive for users to change habits. I think that's true. Plastic is cheap. It's too easy to buy and it's too easy to throw away with no penalty. There should be some cost, like some extra tax on plastic, which is the most damaging. Too easy.
Yeah,
You also showed an open knife
yeah.
that
I
you.
find weapons and stolen goods like iPhones or laptops or empty jewelry boxes. Um, so litter pickers will come across these things. I'm a bit worried about finding bones. I do.
Oh my
To go and
goodness.
look it up. Is it a cow bone or is it a human?
Oh my gosh.
You're looking at
That's
society from the bottom up.
crazy.
Mm.
Yeah.
You're looking at
Did you?
society from the bottom up, and it's hard. Here's something that's been through an animal. A little. But what distresses me more, of course, is when the plastic chokes the animal and put it round their neck. So the reason why we're doing this is, well, we're doing this for the planet, but we're also doing it for our wildlife. Here's some more plastic that's highly eroded. I don't know if it's been through an animal or not, but it does that. And we've got to change our habits, and we've got to change our habits first. I think the most serious the industry that's got to really get their act together are the fishing industries and the anglers. I find so much stuff because they're leaving killing machines in the water, you know, and it doesn't just get the fish tangled up or the wildlife. This gets in your children's feet, you know, in your dog's paws. Um, there's 3 hooks on this one bit of line, um, but we've got to do it, and it's changing everything. If you look at children's diapers, when I was a child, we had terry nappies, and I was potty trained when I was 18 months old now. Because nappies are so good, people aren't training their children until they're 3.5. They're not out of those nappies till they're 3.5. So that's more than Well, that's twice as long as me. And what's that doing to the children? Their bodies aren't, they're not getting control of themselves early enough. So there's all sorts of implications. Plastic is too cheap, too accessible, and people have used it to make packaging more and more of a thing, more and more as a sort of advertising, selling thing. And it's backfiring on us. I find crisp packets that are 30 years old. I love crisps, but they're in such amazingly, beautifully engineered packets. Those packets just aren't going to break down because they've been made to last. And last they do. And our descendants are going to be absolutely horrified because they're going to say, but where did all the fish go? Why did these species die out? How could you have done it? How could you use gas to heat outside areas so people could smoke outside? It's like madness, really, what we're doing. Really mad. You know,
I think so.
and
I mean, there has to be incentives, but there has to be penalties, right? There has to be incentives for companies to change. There has to be penalties for not changing because we know this is a problem.
The whole culture has to change. So almost every day I find a helium balloon washed up on the shore. Helium is a finite resource. We need it for heart operations and things like that. And yet people are buying these balloons for their children who let them go, and then off they go into the environment. And that helium's lost forever. I don't know how we replenish it. You can't. It's an element.
Yeah. Rob has a good point. Bamboo can be a good sustainable alternative to plastic in many cases, from small scale right through to construction. We see this in Japan, how bamboo baskets, bamboo hats, bamboo mats, everything used to be made from bamboo. And when they stopped making everything from bamboo, the bamboo went wild and now is taking over the forest and taking over people's houses. But when it was used, even for food, Japanese people would eat bamboo shoots as well. And it's a great resource if we use it well, and it could definitely take the place of a lot of plastic. We just need to go back to some of these solutions we used to have, right?
Would you like me to take the camera outside?
Yeah, would you? I'd love that.
Some of my things. Right, I'm going to reverse this. So there'll be a bit of a pause here.
Okay.
As just go outside.
How's the weather today? Is it getting warmer there?
Yeah, it's warming up. We had sea mists, quite interesting phenomena yesterday and this morning, but it's burning off, and we're expecting a nice weekend.
Oh, nice. Have we lost you? Are you still there? Are you there?
Can you see me now?
Not yet.
Hi there. Have I lost you?
I can see your shadow.
You're picking me up. Can we see the gravel?
Yes.
Can you see me walking now?
Yes.
Okay. So this isn't a beach. This is where I live. But I just did a display, really, of some of the plastic that I found. So here we go. This is my garden. So can you see that? This is some of the fishing product.
Wow.
The litter caused by fishermen. Can you see that? So I don't mind picking up these fenders and buoys. They've accidentally fallen off boats or they've come loose. These buoys here, that they mark lobster pots, you know. But I find a lot of them. But this is the kind of fishing netting that I find. So all this green PVC netting. They're catching quite small fish, like herrings and mackerel. If I put my finger next to it, you can get some idea of the scale. And this is what gets used extensively and then chopped up at sea. I'm not sure what this is from, but I think it's some sort of crabbing. And then I find other detritus. Now, if you see this, you see that fishing. You need to look it up for me, but that comes from foil fishermen. It might have come a long way. I
Mm-hmm.
find these buckets that have come off boats, and I use them to collect more
Wow.
trash. Here's an old bottle that was in a deposit return scheme. Now here I've put some insulation material on them, but this is one of the fluorescent tubes that I found.
Oh my goodness. You find a lot of those?
Well, I think I found 3, and extraordinary, washed up in the same place at about the same time every year. Now I put that bit of grey insulation foam that I also found washed up round it just to keep it intact, but I found it without that. And here's another one that I found. You see, so those
Oh
are 2 of
yeah,
the
I can see
fluorescent
it.
tubes that I found. But here's a table, and here's an ordinary light bulb that I found. That's one of our light bulbs that we use.
Wow.
And actually, the filament isn't broken. I said to one of my friends, "Shall I see if it works?" Been floating around in the sea. Now here are some of the cans that I would have found washed up on the seashore, and some of the plastic bottles. You can see they're very elderly. Oh, flip-flops, and those are these are deposit return milk bottles that we used to use in England about 30 years ago that I found washed up on the shore. Here's some of the Lynx Africa that the druggies sniff, and here's some old crisp packets. We find an awful lot of them. You can just tell by the design how old they are. They'll have a
Wow.
sell-by date, so I can tell. But these ones are too old. You can't just see. But we find endless wrappers. Now I find so many of these cigarette masses and
Lighters.
masses of
Wow.
lighters. I find a lot of cartridges from wildfowling. I find a lot of tools like this saw. I found about
Saw.
3 or 4. Yeah, workmen use them and then they discard them. But
Oh my
mostly it's sort
goodness.
of little things like this. These are the kind of angling fish hooks I find. Quite a lot. More fishing line. We've talked about pegs. I don't know why I find so many whistles, but I find quite a lot of whistles and things from life jackets. And then over here are things that people have accidentally dropped. Here's a helium balloon. They're quite big. And some stolen items. Find a lot of tennis balls. This is really, really irritating things I find. Can you see these? You know what
What
those
is
are?
what is that? No.
Oh, they're really maddening. They're difficult to carry back from the beach as well. They're tent posts. They're carbon fibre from when
Oh.
people are illegally camping. And then they take their tent home, but they leave the posts or they throw them into the prickly bushes. A lot of this stuff, like, I haven't got many bottles here, but I do collect a lot of bottles. They've just gone off to the recycling. They're chucked into prickly bushes, so it takes me ages to get them out of the bush. So people use blackthorn bushes and other bushes as bins. It's really, really, really irritating. And the bushes are thorny, so they tear the plastic bags that people's picnics have been left in and makes it even more difficult. I wish they would just leave it on the beach. But they're kind of ashamed of themselves, so they sort of hide it or throw it in the water. So there we go. I mean, this is just stuff that I've kept for talks. This is what I managed to pick up today. Here's my litter picking stick. And this is just a few things that I managed to collect this morning. But it's typical. What do we got here? We've got a mask. And I've got a whole collection of masks that I found washed up on the shore here.
Oh my goodness. Look at that.
Yeah. People have made some of them actually. And some have been purchased, and otherwise they're the disposable ones. But we've got a big. Also, I find quite a lot of these blue plastic gloves. So we call that PPE as well. I found 2 or 3 of those today. I found This is like cling film, really awful. Here's one of these carbonated drinks, another PPE glove. Someone's child wet their knickers in that. Plastic bags, and then this was my dog poo I collected this morning in its black plastic bag. You can see this is seaweed. You know, I was in the estuary, actually in the estuary. I'll put that on my flower bed. And then this really distressed me because my father was he loved inventing things, and can you see what I'm looking at? Can you see
It
that?
looks like a piece of wire.
It's black. Yeah, I'll put it on the grass there. Okay, these are cable ties, and someone used this to pin up a notice, an advertising notice, and then when the show was over, they just cut the cable ties and they leave them on the pavement, but like right near the estuary. And I've seen council workers chuck these things into the estuary. These were initially developed by my father, cable ties, in the UK. And he would just be so devastated and upset to know that they are littering the entire world. So people use the design for cable ties. They're used by scaffolders all over London, all over the place. I found them in the desert, in the Emirates, and they get everywhere, and they get into the sea. And my father would be so distressed. He so instigated the initial designs of glass fiber hulled boats. And he said, you know, they were so excited. And he went out with a photographer to photograph the first glass fiber hulled boat that was put together on the west coast of Ireland. And then they set up a workshop in London to develop the products. And he said, we never thought what would happen to glass fiber hulled boats when they reach the end of their lives. So every day I come across a kind of rotting glass fiber hull that no one wants to deal with, that no one is prepared to take away. It's very difficult. I certainly can't move them myself. You need trailers and things like that. So I really think what we're going to need is you know, horses in the UK have to have passports. When the horse dies, the authorities have to be notified, and the horse has to be the carcass has to be disposed of responsibly. You can't just leave a dead horse lying around. And the same needs to apply to boats, from small 8-foot rowing boats to yachts and larger vessels. They're just left along the waterways of England. You go down the canals
That's
or the rivers.
crazy. I can't believe that
Yeah.
they're allowed to do that. It seems like they would have to have a registration, that they would have to prove that it was either given to the right waste authorities or recycled in some way. You have to do that for a car. You can't just leave a car anywhere, right?
I think you can.
Oh, you can.
Yeah, on your own property. I mean, you might get.
All right. Yeah. Sometimes you do see that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, a lot of moorings you have to pay for, so that's a lack of incentive. But I can tell you, along the Solent, there's quite a few rotting boats. I don't know much about it, actually. I don't know about the regulations, so please don't quote me. It's just an observation. It's my observation that a lot of
So,
boats.
Sophie, if you wanted to get rid of some of the waste that you pick up, do you just put it out with your regular garbage, or do you have to take it to a special place to get rid of?
Okay, myself, what I do is when I get home, I divide the bottles and the cans that can be recycled. These old cans, they can't be recycled. They've had it. I've been told they can't be recycled. Um, just incidentally, you can see how old that can is.
Looks
And
really
I
old,
often
yeah.
find it's like 40, but a very early can. And incidentally, I find a lot of cans on the Solent that have never even been opened. I find a lot of stuff that's never been opened. Anyway, I try to recycle the cans and the plastic. I definitely recycle all the glass and the broken glass. But a lot of the wrappers and things like this, it's not a huge volume for me. So I put it out in my domestic rubbish. But if I'm cleaning, if I walk into town and collect litter on the way, then I'll use one of the bags I found and I'll put it in a litter bin, because that shows the council that this is litter. And it's sort of, I'm picking up little bits, but it's what we have been advised we should do rather than take it home. So if we find litter on the street, I put it in the litter bin. But the problem is, I'm finding a lot of cans, and I think, oh, I ought to take them home, because if I've put it in this litter bin, I don't know if they'll be recycled. And in England, all the local authorities are different, and people get very confused about what we can and can't recycle. And my husband thinks that you can recycle this. You really can't. Try and persuade him that this can't be recycled, darling. It's full of earth and sand and stuff, and it's just going to contaminate the whole load. So, yeah, what I do with these things is I give them to friends, or we have a boat jumble. I mean, I could give some of these things, they're fine. I could give them back to the fishermen. But other things like this are broken, and I'm afraid they go to landfill. See, it's lost its thing. I made one actually into a child's swing. So sometimes they can be repurposed, or I give them to yachtsmen if they're decent. And I'm on the crew of a boat that we row for charity, so the nicest ones are going to her. So,
Nice.
and then sometimes if I get a crate, where's this come from? Stored away. Right, that's come all the way from the Outer Hebrides, that bit of plastic. But they often have the writing on them, so I contact the co-op and say, what do you want me to do with your crate? But they have proved quite useful, these crates, for like taking broken glass to the recycling and things like that. So I'm not grumbling too much about the fishing crates,
Sophie,
but it just shows how far they floated.
Yeah. Sophie, is there any support for people like you who are volunteering cleaning up beaches or riversides? Is there any local council that'll give you materials like gloves or bags to pick things up and take it after your cleanup? Is that happening in the UK?
Yeah, some councils are very good, and they work with volunteer litter picking groups, and they're really supportive, especially when they're doing road verges. It's really difficult. We need the councils to close roads or to collect up all the bags. I mean, some volunteer groups collect thousands of bags a year, or some individual, the solo litter pickers, collecting like 450 to 1,000 bags of litter a year. That's really impressive. I mean, It's a huge amount. Litter Pickers of the New Forest, we get sponsored by local businesses who provide us with vests and the litter pickers. You saw my litter picker. Where is it? Can't see it now. Here it is.
That's a very fancy tongs. I like that.
But actually, I use an old boat hook that I found to get under some bushes, and I've got an old litter picker that works really well. So they've offered me more, but it's quite nice to have one for a friend, because it's really good to go litter picking with one friend for safety reasons, because you can get stuck in the mud, or you might come across some suspicious character or something like that.
That's
really
good advice. Do you have any other advice for people who might want to pick up some litter? Like, do you always wear gloves, or do you often have your bucket for broken things? Is that right?
Yeah, I like using this bucket. People use black plastic bags, but I like this bucket because it can take the broken glass, and it gets quite heavy. It weighs about 4 kgs when full. Now, this morning I only picked up, about 20 things, but normally that bucket will contain about 260, 250 pieces of microplastics, you see, little things that are very time consuming to pick up. I keep a counter, actually, sometimes. I've got it's got a little clicker, and I just click on the counter to take a record of what I pick up, and then I post it on social media so that we've got a lasting running total. it's much easier now. We've got iPhones and can use Twitter and WhatsApp groups and things. As far as safety is concerned, I used to pick things up by hand, which I didn't mind doing on the coast. But people say always use your litter picker. It's difficult for the really fiddly little things, but I don't want to, touch things like masks
Yeah.
or PPE. So I always use the litter picker now. You have to use gloves when you're doing things like housing estates and anywhere with other people. You don't have to use gloves, I don't think, on the beach, but you must be careful because there are containers that are full of bleach or full of chemicals, often. So yeah, you do have to be very careful, and obviously you have to be careful of broken glass and the fish hooks. And it's funny, when you're working with seaweed and normal natural detritus, something like this is hidden, and it's really easy to get a fish hook stuck in your finger. You can't even see the fish hook, and then you say, "Oh, there it is," and it's sticking into you. I'm absolutely aghast. We're living through a pandemic, and these items that I found have been in people's mouths, and they think it's okay to throw them out the window in front of my house. I mean, it's like a complete madness. And you think, haven't people realized yet what we're doing? It is bonkers.
That is
So, yeah,
bonkers.
it's bonkers. Oh, look at this. It's so
Oh, you
sad.
found bags full of people's wallets and things, huh?
Hmm?
Does that mean it was stolen and thrown in the river?
What do you think?
Yeah.
Some of them, is this someone's
It's quite
makeup bag?
old.
Oh, yeah, it's been lying around. This is someone's precious things, all their glasses and stuff. Um, I've told the police about most things, but I gave up. It was wasting their time because there was no DNA on it, because that's why it's thrown in the river.
Right.
Interestingly, see here, an old iPhone stolen, presumably because it was with the laptop and a jewelry box. This was interesting. This is a bit of they're chaps that you wear riding horses, and I found one on the causeway, and I thought, that's a funny thing to leave on the causeway. It must have fallen off someone's Land Rover or their trailer. It was part of a huge load of stolen horse tack that the thief drove off with over the bridge the night before, and I found this one piece. And I informed the owners, but they didn't come back to get it or anything. But that is a stolen item. I think they should have gone down, because it possibly could have had some DNA on it, but they didn't.
Wow.
They didn't come to collect it.
Yeah, sometimes we do find wallets or bags like full of cards, but never any cash, but we always hand it into the police office, and it's
Sure.
probably someone who just dropped it. I think maybe not stolen, but you never know.
No, it'll be stolen. And for instance, this handbag had some business cards in, a wodge of them. And I rang up the lady, and she confirmed it was stolen out of her car, but she didn't want it back. It's actually a really nice handbag, and it's got massive pairs of glasses in it. But a little animal had been living in it. Had been stolen years before, so she didn't want it back. But yeah, it's been an interesting journey. So I've been doing this like as much as I possibly can for 3 years, and keeping records, and I'm learning a little bit. But this is really, I'm just a sort of grassroots reporter, sort of coming back with, like, this is just what I found. And isn't it odd that I'm finding so many unopened cans in the sea? I've found things like, full jars of coffee. We've eaten it. We've drunk it. People drop their shopping in the water. And I've found a lot of things that I've repurposed or given away. So this is just a little tiny bit to show you.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I'm so glad you're doing what you're doing and documenting and putting it on social media and talking to people like us about what you find. It's all so important for spreading awareness of this huge problem, which is very worldwide.
Yeah, so you can, if you go to my blog, it's Sophie Neville, that's SophieNeville.net. And if you go to the writer's blog, and I am on Twitter as Sophie underscore Neville, and I'm on Facebook, Sophie Neville 3. And you can, I'll report back on what's come in on the latest gale, or on a movement. We're in the middle of Keep Britain Tidy's Great British Spring Clean at the moment. And I have links to movements that you can join or how you can get involved. And you can see in my past blog posts exactly what I found and when. And you can see photographs of the area that people have taken from drones. And it's quite interesting. So there's lots of interest. And we're sort of gradually piecing together patterns and being able to come to conclusions that I think are really important. For instance, is drink driving, the fly tipping that we witness, uh, just the sheer amount of poisonous substances that are getting into the solent, like these fluorescent tubes. Um, I don't have any of the 25-litre cans of bleach here, but I rest assured I do find them. Um, and things like these buckets, I mean, these were washed up. That's why I started using a bucket to collect the items, because I would find them washed up on the beach. Although I bought this purple one. It's a little bit bigger and easier to walk with. But yeah, this is what we're doing. So yeah, you can follow me on sophieneville.net, and I write about other things like books because I'm an author. But I keep posting the latest on what we're finding in the New Forest National Park.
Thank you so much, Sophie. It's been wonderful hearing from you and all your insights about your diligence, not giving up on beach cleaning and litter picking up. Thank you so much for everything you're doing. Keep up the good work.
Oh, it's lovely to talk to you and to know that people in Japan care as well. So yeah, let's keep in touch, and do come back to me at another time
I
and
will.
update on what's been happening.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
all
if I if
interesting.
I visit if I visit the UK, I want to come and do
Mm-hmm.
beach cleaning with you, and if you come to Japan, come and do beach cleaning with me. We can make it part of travel.
Yeah, I've got I belong to the Arthur Ransom Society, and we have an Arthur Ransom Club in Japan with about 200 members. So one day I'd love to get to Japan and maybe give a talk on Making of Swallows and Amazons, which was a film that they're all fans of. So one day it would be lovely to come over. I'd really like to come.
Yeah.
And happy to give talks and maybe even bring some of this stuff, my little plastic souvenirs,
Well,
or
your
do a
your
over.
blog and all your photos and all your commentary is so wonderful and so insightful, and it's the kind of information we all need to be aware of. So thank you so
Oh,
much.
yeah, I hope it inspires other people to be solo litter pickers, because you can do it by yourself, or you and a friend, or you and a kid. Children love it. I've done some of this with 3-year-olds. They love it. We've had great fun. But
Great.
lovely to see you. Bye.
Bye. Have a great day. Thanks everybody for joining.